All right. Hello, everybody, virtually. Kind of wish I was there. This is a quick talk. I get a whole 15 minutes with you today, and I'll leave some space at the end for question and answer. Today, I wanted to share an experience that I've had, probably the most mature fire experience I've had as an implementer over the years on the subject of consent around SDOH, the social determinants of health. I'll just tell you a little story and how we were able to move the ball forward, approaching fire in kind of a different way than we have in the past, and share it front to back. A little bit about myself. That's my floating head over there to the right. Ron Sweeney. I'm a solutions architect. I work for a very small outfit called Integration Required. Over the years, we have been given a lot of very luminary and cool projects in the interoperability space. We've been very fortunate to get some forward thinking things. So we've had our hands in fire and DICOM and IHE and meaningful use over the years. We like to get in technical arguments and lose them. We like fire puns and are terrible at those too. But one of our projects we've been working on for the past 2 years is a event-driven platform for a statewide assistance agency. So this is around getting folks community resources around social determinants of health and building a platform to execute getting folks referrals and then getting them to some of the vast number of resources or quite scarce resources that we have in our communities to help people along to better their health on things that are affecting them in their environment. So we were brought specifically aboard for doing an Epic integration using Direct and the CCDA to basically any exit workflow where a patient or a client would be getting a referral off of a hospital system into the community to get community resources for some things that they're lacking. Did a lot of work around different types of ways to get referrals and service requests in. Worked with openreferral.net. We even did one with HL7V2, which we're not very proud of, but it works. And then the latest one was our first fire-based. It's kind of our gateway drug to really plugging fire into this solution. Was around consent, which is super important, and we really wanted to have a targeted approach to fire to where we made sure that it met a certain need, and we targeted the subject of taking care of consent for us. So kind of looking at the situation that we had, our statewide assistance agency, which is in the center there, had a very strong affinity to making sure that they had something called a closed loop referral. You may hear this, it was kind of, it makes sense to me. It also makes sense in the terms of reimbursement, but when we get referrals out of a hospital system and into the community, the hospital system really wanted to know, what became of that? What was the outcome of that? So if they referred them to a food bank, they would want some sort of loop to go back to like an Epic system to give them like a progress note. And our first one was direct based, so it was really easy with CCDAs to have something come in and then provide them an updating progress note in the hospital where it goes to an inbox and they can file that. You can squint and look at this page here and know that consent's kind of a big deal, becoming more of a big deal, and we'd really like to have like a different type of consent, which like blanketed certain terms and had relationships with many of the community-based resources. So we set out to do consent, and this is typically what you see, right? This is very theatrical, but it comes in the forms of a caseworker asking the client or the patient, hey, do you consent to us sending your information to a food bank? Do you consent to this? But really what's happening, you're just flipping a bit in a database somewhere and you're calling it good. So this actually works for things like, hey, yeah, you're free to contact me with my information that I gave you. But it doesn't really scale. And it really fell short when establishing consent between one-to-many and the community-based orgs. And also didn't allow us to update our consent record, which is super important. Like if you wanted to, surface another one that had different types of, verbiage in it, you realistically should have an array of consent records that you can kind of reference. So fell a little bit short. So we went out on a technological task to solve this problem. and looked at Fire first. But this is our first time we looked deeper into Fire, and ended up on Simplifier to start looking into packages and profiles. And we found Gravity's package out there for SDOH on simplifier.net. I'm sure everybody there is up to speed in this stuff. It was news to us up to a year ago, so we got really excited about it. Simplifier to us is like GitHub for Fire packages and profiles and all things that are related. Gravity project is directly related to social determinants of health, so that was super great. And we started to take a look at this package and kind of, as technologists, tear it down. So we're like, okay, we're going to play with the, the different resources that are available, etc. I do want to go back though. If folks are paying attention, you're probably going like, hey, you don't need a package to do consent because consent is a resource in US Core. And you're absolutely right. But where we were at in the process is we wanted to kind of look at what was down the road for us. And consent was one of them. And then we also found that the consent resource that was surfaced in the SDOH package had a lot of verbiage around referring from a HIPAA organization to non-HIPAA organization. It had a constraint on it. So without knowing a whole ton about what that meant, it just meant, it was just another selling factor that, the consent that's available, which would certainly work, especially in the example I'm going to show you today, that we could take advantage of using the consent resource that was in the package at a later date. We started going through this. We're doing the whole API first. We're a bunch of technologists that are interfacing with the business, coming back, trying to figure out what they said. And we're kind of going, oh, okay, we understand this. So what was super cool about, how these packages are surfaced under Simplifier is that, it was almost like taking a crash course in SDOH. We struggled with like language and calling, what is a referral? Because we're all very healthcare centric folks. And now we're into this community-based stuff. And, we're arguing about, the person has an encounter, that's a patient. So if this person has a case, is that a client? We started going through all, but this cleared all that stuff up for us. It's super cool. So we, it's almost like we stayed in a Holiday Inn that night before, and we started to understand the language a little more just by interrogating this package. Then it even got cooler from a technology standpoint. And the tooling was super great as we found how we went out and got these, and we got to look at the Fire terminal, which was super cool because it went out and got all of the dependencies that we needed. It was able to download them into one particular directory and target them so we can kind of take a look at it. And it was also very useful for us to use it in CI/CD and automation. So if we needed to stand up a dev environment and install this package in an automated fashion, this tool fit pretty great because it gave us some promises of where it landed. So we got the tooling, started getting excited about that. Then we go to the spec because that comes with the packages, and everybody seems to feel a little bit better when they look at the Swagger def, and we certainly did. And started perusing the requests, looking at the difference between the consent record and some of the resources that had changed by inside of the package. But admittedly, the epiphany that we had is everything that we didn't have to do if we use this package, right? All those naming wars that we had kind of go away. Data model, you can say this about Fire or anything, like we don't have to dream up attributes anymore. All those things that we were trying to, like observations and classifications of observations and those things, everything that we were making duplicate objects for just seemed to kind of get a little bit clearer when we started looking at this package. And terminology mappings, that's a nightmare for us as technology folks, really trying to understand the handful of ICD-10 codes or that pertain to this industry, and that those map directly to reimbursement sometimes. So, and looking at the example workflows and going, hey, we're not the first ones to do this, which is pretty great. So we took action and went out and got a service-based Fire Accelerator from InterSystems, grabbed all the SDOH packages, and then kind of this is where things started to snap for us and like, oh, okay, this is what people are talking about with these packages. So admittedly, I was going to like Simplifier and going, how come when I hit this Fire thing I downloaded, that this stuff isn't here? It didn't really click to me that I'd have to install and appropriate these packages, which to me is like a technological wonder that, these things can be done on the fly. And this product did it. So, and gave us the instructions to do so. So we had to get ourselves a service, go out and get the SDOH package, update the dependencies and associate them to the endpoint. I'll kind of, if this isn't too much, I've kind of got this going here, but I don't know if you can see it, and that's the size, but I'm just kind of going through how you browse for a folder and you import these in a certain way. And hopefully this thing is going fast enough. So I went and grabbed the dependency tree, ended up saying, okay, with trial and error, we load this package, this package, this package, this package, and this gives us a final endpoint. And it went smoothly. And towards the end of it, once you've loaded the packages, you'll see that you have your endpoint. You can actually go to your endpoint, edit it, and the packages that you are now available, you can check those and make those available to your endpoint. And this process takes a little bit, but it's doing a lot of work. And it's actually provisioning the endpoint, creating all of those attributes, maybe even some resources on top of it, and loading that profile for use. So we've got it pretty much stood up at this point, and I can show you here. And when you're done, you can go into your Fire Accelerator and see, okay, yeah, I got all of these are deployed and they're ready to go. So now all those things that we saw in the packages, we can start throwing data at it. That's kind of where I wanted to go next. How am I doing on time? I got a few minutes. And I have a very simple Postman collection that I prepared for this. Not a big deal, but what I did want to show you, now we didn't implement it this way because this is going right towards the consent resource. If we do this this way, then our related resources like our orgs and our patient really have to exist for them to glue together. How we've done it is with a bundle type approach programmatically inside, because our bundles are pretty much said, hey, if this patient consents to like food pantries, it usually goes to a service area and it's this group. But just as a quick demonstration, I'll show you that I will see if I can get a successful create. And it's not really amazing, but what we can now do, instead of just tagging the checkbox and setting a flag in a Boolean, we can now serve up different ways that our community-based organizations can now query for their consent records. The agency can also do it, and the patient can be like, why do I have food pantries in my Instagram feed? What did I actually agree to here? We can actually surface that. But realistically, what we wanted to do, and the kind of the point and the takeaways that I'd like you to have out of this was like just a little bit about the package management, how that happened, because that was a mystery to us. And I really like Simplifier. I don't know how to use quite everything there, but just going in there, if I have a particular niche workflow in healthcare or something else that brushes against it, it's a super great resource to see what others have contributed. Take a look at like the things that you don't have to do if you implement some of these packages. You can take these as a base, and then if you have something amazing that sets you above and beyond everybody else that you want, you can extend them. But really, raising the bar when it comes to consent is just, I think, paramount. I don't think it was that difficult to snap a quick Fire endpoint out there at very low cost and raise the bar from just saying somebody consented and having that stand up for an audit versus doing what you just saw. I don't think there's a drift there. I just like to raise the bar a little bit, but yeah, that was the implementation, and I wish I was there so I could see you and interact with y'all, but I'm not. And if you want to contact me, that's my LinkedIn and my email. And how much time do I have? About 5 minutes. Are there any questions?
You did great, Ron. Thank you. I didn't see any questions coming in through Ruba, but I'm going to unmute the room now to see if there are any questions coming in from there.
Okay.
It'll take a sec. I'm not sure if this works.
It looks like it's
Hello.
Hi.
Ron.
I didn't hear.
You can't hear me now? Yes? No.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry. Now I can hear you.
You can't hear me now, Ron?
I can, yeah.
Yes?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for the talk. My question was, if you said this is an integration with an Epic system, were the consent data that you were getting to your Fire server that was coming from Epic?
Yeah, so I think it sort of sent the wrong message there. The consent stuff we did was outside of the Epic integration. We really relied on the consent of Epic. It was just kind of calling out our first integration with an SDOH one. So we were kind of relying on the exit workflow of the patient having the consent go to the resource. So didn't really dabble at that end of the consent record, but had to establish our own.
I muted the room for a bit because they were echoing. But I unmuted them now again. So if there are more questions.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
This is great. If you were to do this again, what would you do in terms of lessons learned, so that, for others that are doing something similar, what advice would you give for us?
Well, I made a mistake and we went back. The mistake that I made was, I think I kind of mentioned it when I was going through the Postman collection. Didn't really understand. I really thought Fire was super relational. And so what I was doing was preloading orgs and preloading people, where realistically all I had to do was build a bundle, so they all got created at once and then posted a bundle root. So that's one advice that I have, to where you can almost have a basically unmanaged consent, to where the resources, all of them get created at once in a bundle. I'd go that route versus like making sure that, hey, all of those resource organizations you have, all the food banks and all that, it's impossible to load all those orgs. I would do them on the fly. That's really about it. We're not very far into this. We're about 6 months into this. But we just feel better knowing that we don't have that checkbox anymore, and it actually means a little bit more in providing the services. Did that answer your question at all? Oh, you guys get muted on me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mute them because of the echo.
Oh, okay.
I hope that was the question. I also saw a question coming in through Ruva, and it is, in the example you provided, what entity are you pulling consent, and are you the final user, or do you pass on that consent information? How is it passed on, if so?
One more time, I'm so sorry.
I will repeat it. In the example you provided, what entity are you pulling consent, and are you the final user, or do you pass on that consent information? How is it passed on, if it's passed on?
So, well, that's an excellent question. I probably didn't go into what we considered consent was. So we considered consent, the entities that we were binding were an array of orgs, a client that were attached to an attachment, which we considered to be our consent record. So the example was a PDF we use, like a questionnaire. So if I heard this question right, the question was, what entities were being kind of bound in the consent record? And it was an array of orgs and a client or patient at the same time. Does that answer your question?
I think the person should ask it through Ruva. If it didn't answer, you can look back at it in Ruva.
Yeah,
yeah, you can check it in. I think we came up to the end of this session. Thanks a lot, Ron.